It's spring, and in this video John's going to talk you through 5 garden weeds that you need to be rather wary of at this time of year before they start smothering out your other plants as the summer progresses. As always with all our videos, if you have a little look in the description below, you'll see some timestamps which will help you navigate your way through your video at your leisure. Welcome to John Horsey Horticulture. John's been teaching horticulture professionally for over 30 years now, and on this channel we're hoping to help you develop your gardening skills. Whether you're new to gardening and would like some advice on how to propagate, grow some vegetables, sow seeds, a little bit of pest control, or whether you're a seasoned horty who could always use some extra tips and advice. If you like learning those things, do consider following us. There's no charge. Push the subscribe button. If you push the all-important notification bell, that lets you know every time we upload a new video.
Hello again. If you remember last time we were together, we talked about how I use lots of ground cover plants to save having to do a lot of weeding. And we looked at the laniums and the heathers and the various other plants which spread around quite nicely, and my plants come up through it. Now, of course, that works very well when you've got the garden established. This little plot, I literally put this pond in last year. I'm very pleased. It's actually got toad spawn in it, which is very unusual. I'm very pleased about that. But of course the bare ground does give the chance for things to get going. And one of the worst plants that I find in the garden is this one, which is called the hairy bittercress. I'm sure you all know it. It comes up with these little white flowers, and then as the season goes on, the flowers obviously get pollinated and the seeds form in these little seed pods. And as the pod ripens and dries, it swells, and I'm sure you've all been in the situation when you've got to pull this stuff up and it pops everywhere, and it gives it a name. We used to call it popping cress as well. And of course you know that when you've popped, there's a whole load more seeds has been sown for next year. Anyway, let's have a look at it closer up on the table. Right, so here we are. Here's our hairy bittercress. Before we start, perhaps we should look at what is a weed. I mean, the standard definition is it's a plant growing in the wrong place, which I suppose works very well. Somebody once said to me that it could be a plant whose full potential has not yet been recognised, and I suppose that could be applied as well. This one's actually is edible, so I suppose if you wanted to eat it, it's a useful plant to have. However, in a garden situation, it does spread around very quickly, and you'd end up with a bed of it, and I think most of us would prefer to have something else. So generally we try to remove it before it can seed, and that's the clue to what we're doing today. It's fairly early in the season, and if we can get this one up before these seeds come that I was talking about just now, and get rid of it, then it won't spread and we'll be able to contain it. So that's the ins and outs mainly of it. One of the reasons why this one is so successful is because it's what we call an ephemeral plant. That means its life cycle, and a life cycle is literally from the stage of a seed germinating to a little plant, the plant then flowering, the flowers being pollinated, setting seed, and the seed getting back into the ground. That's the life cycle. With an annual plant, as you can imagine, that takes a year, which makes sense. A biennial has 2 years, but this one is exceptional. This is a thing called ephemeral, and ephemerals could have more than one life cycle in a year. And if you have a mild winter, this thing will be flowering right through the winter and seeding all the time. Most ephemerals are actually weeds. We've got this one, we've got groundsel, that's another one. And the annual meadowgrass, that's another ephemeral weed, ephemeral plant, which of course because of that tends to make it a weed. So there we are, there we have it. There's hairy bittercress. Every year I try to get it out before it seeds. I rarely succeed because although I try my best, there's always one that hides away somewhere where you don't expect it, and when you come to find it, you pull it up and it pops everywhere, and you know you've got seeds for next year. But it's all part of the fun of gardening. So let's have a look at some other plants which we can call weeds and which I would suggest we try to get rid of at this time of year. Well, the next one on my little list today is a thing called, it's a little Veronica. We know it as bird's eyes, but It's not the well-known bird's eye that you get in hedgerows and things, the bright blue Veronica cameroides. This is a little one called filiformis, or sometimes hydropholium, and you wait for it to flower, and the flowers, when they do come, are tiny. Can you see that little blue flower? I mean, you might think that's quite a charming little flower to have, but it does tend to spread all over the place. They germinate quite early, so if you can get on top of them and or ideally hoe them or pull them, then you will stop it spreading all over the place. And that can be quite a nuisance. But it does come through early, so you can deal with it. But you see here, I've just pulled up a clump, and can you see all the roots on it? There's lots of little plants in here that have come out as I pulled them. So it really is a good one to get rid of quite early. The next one is sometimes called cleavers or goosegrass. It's actually a Galium aparine. You all know this one from when you were children. It's one of those things that used to stick on people's backs and see how long before they realised it was sticking there, because it's got these backward pointing hairs which help it to grow up through plants. It can be quite a problem because it's a massive plant and it does smother other plants. So that's one of the reasons why we try to get it early. On the plus side, it's an annual, and usually if you've got if you've got a mass of it, you trace it back, and it's often just one little root, and you pull that root out and the whole lot comes up. So it's one to get rid of. It'll have little white flowers later on. Yes, it's a fun plant. It's one very reminiscent of childhood, isn't it? Its other name is actually goosegrass, and I often wondered why it was called goosegrass. Then some years ago, when I was keeping geese, I threw some of this into the goose pen, and they gobbled it up. They do love it. They're very, very fond of it. And it's rather strange, because you wouldn't think it'd be very appetizing being so hairy. But there again, that's how good its name. Geese love it. And I'm not quite so keen on it. Okay, and the next one on my list is a little Epilobium. Fireweed, of course. And it has little flowers reminiscent of fireweed, much smaller. This one is a much smaller leafed form. It's not like the large tall growing one. You can see it's a very spreading one, and I'm sure you've seen it in the garden. At this time it's looking like that. Later on it'll get taller and taller, and it does take over. It smothers out other plants, seeds everywhere, and it's a very insignificant flower. So personally, I'm not very keen on that one, and I tend to get that one out and let other things take its place. I do remember years ago when I took on a new garden, and it was at that stage when they were all coming up to flower, and I thought, well, I was busy sort of moving house, I was getting busy indoors. I thought it won't really hurt if they flower, because the seed will be easy to control. What a big mistake. About a month later on, after some rain, the seed, which had gone all over the garden, I think every single one of them germinated. So I had a devil of a job to get it up. So I've learnt my lesson from that, and I never let this little Epilobium seed, otherwise you've got a lot of trouble from it. Very prolific plant. Right, here's the last one of my 5 today. You've noticed all the ones I've got today are actually annuals. They're ones which are very easy to control, and that's why we're starting with these. Later on we'll look at how we'll deal with the more pernicious weeds, things like bindweed and ground elder, and ones which have underground spreading roots and come up year after year and are not quite so funny. But anyway, this is another annual, and it's a Euphorbia. Well, you all know euphorbias and you think, oh, they're lovely plants, but this is helioscope, and it's sometimes called the sun spurge. And again, it does come up, it seeds quite freely. That's it, so that's the flower. It's not really very spectacular. I mean, if you like it, fair enough. Personally, I do try to keep under control, as I think there are better things to grow. A word of warning though, I mean, the things we've looked at, I mean, some of them, well, the hairy bittercress is edible, and I think the others are possibly edible. I've heard of people eating the goosegrass, but this one is definitely not. Like all euphorbias, when you pull it off, and you can see that, but they have that white sap, which we know this is a problem when we look at the garden euphorbias, and it does cause them swelling. It can cause problems on your skin, so just be careful when you handle it. I mean, generally it's not an issue. You just put it up and it comes up, it doesn't break. I've broken this one here and you see the saps come up, so the last thing I do is put that anywhere near my skin because it can be quite poisonous. So that's brought me to the end of the 5 that I selected for today. There are a lot more weeds, of course, as you know, and it depends on what you call a weed. We here have lots of meadow buttercup, which I think a lot of people call that a weed. Buttercup's a weed. I love it. It comes up about 4 or 5 foot high, and it looks superb in a few months' time. And I'm sure that we'll be showing you some photographs of that later on. But anyway, there's some that I would regard as trying to keep under control at the moment.
Well, we do hope that gave you some ideas, and if you enjoyed that and would like to learn some more, do push the subscribe button, ding the all-important notification bell. In the meantime, thanks so much for joining us here in Somerset. We've really enjoyed having you. Until next time.